Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I can't present my paper in the main channel in the Turkish language, but let me, technically, is it possible here? Let me do it in English. As also Dr. Valkenberg said yesterday, I have completed my PhD in Tilburg in the Netherlands on the Gülen movement. The focus of my thesis was on the message of the Gülen movement for the reconciliation of social conflicts, especially from the perspective of social cohesion. After finishing my PhD, I discovered that I didn't know too much about the Gülen movement. And I have decided to start with new studies on the movement. But this time, from the perspective of the criticism of the movement, what are the critics on the movement in the Netherlands, in the United States, in Germany, in Turkey, or in the UK? Are there any similarities or differences? And from which groups does the movement receive the critiques, and why? What are the fears of people on the movement, and again, why? And to what extent is the movement's activism, educational and intercultural activism, a source of religious or social conflicts in these countries for the host society? And how can the criticism be explained from the perspectives of social, political, or religious infrastructure of these countries in which the Gülen movement operates? And also, what are the effects of the local conditions on these received critics? I think these are interesting questions to study. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to talk about these interesting questions, but I think such approaches can help the host society, the authorities, but also the movement itself to understand the movement, to analyze the movement. As said by Professor Weller yesterday in his evaluation, the movement is not perfect. I think that it's an important, relevant reflection. And such a focus, maybe at the next conference, entitled "The Criticism of the Movement," can help the movement and the people. So, Mr. Chairman, let me say something about my theme for today. The next minutes I'm going to talk about Fethullah Gülen's Islamic ethic and its practical perspectives. First of all, I want to define the concept of Islamic ethic shortly. What does it mean in the Islamic tradition generally, and what's its meaning within the vision of the Gülen movement particularly? And then I'll make a link to the concept of the middle way. At the end of my presentation, I'll discuss several principles reminding ethical values from Gülen's perspective. Islamic ethic, or in Turkish ahlak, is also an Arabic word. It means the proper moral conduct. It implies positive traits of character, especially those noble qualities that were perfected and modeled by the Prophet Muhammad. In other terms, ahlak is the concept of the virtues that comprise good character in Islamic moral teachings. It was generally shaped as an amalgamation of the teachings of the Quran, the prophetic tradition, the Sunnah, and the fiqh, the precedents of Islamic jurists embedded in an Islamic tradition such as Shiite or Sunni. In general, I can say that Islamic ethic is based on the Quranic principle, Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. It means commanding good and forbidding evil. This is the general principle of the Islamic ethic. Based on my earlier studies on Fethullah Gülen's works and speeches, I can say that his understanding, his ethical understanding, is based on this Quranic principle, Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, commanding good and forbidding evil. Ahlak is about the human being. It's about a person's ethical development. When I screened the books and speeches of Gülen, I came to the conclusion that Gülen puts the human being at the center of all things. He puts the human being at the center of his activities and projects. To him, character education, character training, and morality education are important tools to discover ethical values and to learn them. Educational projects and dialogue activities also aims to discover these ethical values. In his ethical and educational understanding, Gülen focuses on being a good example to others, in Turkish temsil. His focus is not on preaching, also in Turkish tabligh. Thus his focus is on temsil. So being a good example to others is a constant theme in his teaching, also in the vision of the Gülen movement, and it can be found in the movement's educational and dialogue projects. For example, the teachers bring their students together with handicapped and with people living in poverty, and the movement's vision on ethics involves not only schools, but also families, communities, media, and business activities. Now, I would like to make a link to the concept of the middle way. Middle way is an important concept in Gülen's teaching. It's to a great extent similar to Aristotle's conceptualization. Aristotle criticized the Platonic virtues versus thesis categorization, and he classified the phenomena in three groups. Two of them are thesis, ifrat and tafrit, excess and deficiency, and the other one is the virtue, the main, the middle way. In his sermons entitled Ethical Considerations, Ahlaki Mülazalar, Gülen interprets and repeats the Islamic concept of Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path, and it is also recited in a Muslim's prayers 40 times a day, especially in the Surah Fatiha, as the middle way between ifrat and tafrit, excess and deficiency. Based on my studies, I can argue that the core concept that constitutes Gülen's views and thus the vision of the Gülen movement participants can be characterized as the middle way, Sirat al-Mustaqim. And all the concepts of the movement are bundled in the Hizmet discourse, service to one's fellow human beings. As some of you know, Hizmet is the other name of the Gülen movement. And each underlying principle of Gülen's teaching derives directly from the idea of living to serve humanity through the Quranic principle, what I mentioned, commanding good and forbidding evil, Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. This involves taking the middle way, promoting virtues and trying to prevent the spread of vices. These principles include having an ultimate goal, altruism, living for others, sense of personal responsibility, and a person of hurt. Gülen considers these to be the sine qua non attributes of a person of hizmet. Let me now move to some of Gülen's principles, reminding ethical values, some principles recalling moral values. Based on a Quranic verse, Gülen explained that everyone acts according to his disposition and thus displays his own character. It is an important step in acquiring moral values when a person knows, feels, and perceives his mistakes. Gülen posits 4 principles to see own fallacies and faults, defects and deficiencies, and to stay away from delusions and caprices, and to find the right path, the middle way. The first principle is to find a guide, maybe a spiritual guide, who will enlighten and inspire the individual in organizing his life. An educator who will redirect him to right path. A teacher who will remind him some of the gospels of life. The second principle is the selection of a good friend or a coach who reminds ethical values and shows one's fallacies and faults. The third principle is getting rid of fallacies and faults, and adapting a good morality is to listen, to value what has been said, negatively or positively, about yourself, and to interrogate yourself proportionally. In this respect, a critical reflective attitude always offers a learning opportunity. The last, fourth principle for gaining good moral values and eliminating bad habits and immorality is to be among people and to be involved in human society. This interaction enables the person to learn human values and to discover feelings and emotions about himself. Further, the movement has set out to produce what Gülen calls the golden generation, Altın Nesil, a virtuous generation that can integrate modern realities with Islamic values such as altruism, love, self-sacrifice, self-control, and reflection. Gülen argues that such a new generation can only be realized through the development of individuals' minds, their behavior, and spirituality, their spirituality. Metaphorically speaking, I call them 3H: head, heart, and hands or habits. I can say that Gülen's moral education is based on these 3 aspects that are essential to integrate Muslim identity with modern realities, and so to build a golden generation. Finally, I can say that the movement participants use the ethical thoughts and practices of Fethullah Gülen as an instrument to make public spaces for positive relations between Muslims and non-Muslims. Central elements of his ethical message are justice, modesty, equality, patience, forgiving, understanding, love, altruism, humility, respect for rights, truthfulness, responsibility, and so on. I think many Western thinkers, such as Jürgen Habermas, Bhikkhu Parekh, Caldwell Smith, Hans Küng, they have also expressed such ideas in the West. It can be said that Gülen recombines Islamic values with new forms in new practices also in the West. Therefore, I think that the movement has the characterization of a hybrid of tradition and modernity. Two professors from the Netherlands, Professor Herman Beck and Gerard Wiegers, in their recent book about Islam and ethics, they categorize three Islamic mainstreams in a Western society. One of the mainstreams they describe is the modern Salafia Islam. The second one is the liberal individualistic stream, and the third one is the middle orthodoxy. It's also described as the Wasatiyya movement. Wasatiyya literally means the middle way. For example, the scholar Al-Qaradawi is linked with the Wasatiyya movement. And these scholars, Professor Beck and Wiegers from the Netherlands, they categorize in an interview that the Gülen movement, the Gülen movement as a special form, as a special segment of within the Wasatiyya movement, within the middle current. So in closing, based on my own observations inside and outside the movement, and on my earlier studies on the movement, I can arguably say that the movement is a movement of i'tidal, Sirat al-Mustaqim. A movement practices Gülen's Islamic ethic of the middle way, which can accommodate local differences. Thank you very much for your attention. The question about the movement, the fears of the movement in different countries. Regarding Al-Qaradawi, I'm not an expert on Al-Qaradawi. Herman Beck and Professor Wiegers, they say that Al-Qaradawi is linked with the Wasatiyya movement, and these two professors, they say we see some links, some characteristics regarding the movement, that the movement is a movement who take the middle way in the society with its projects and programs. With regard to criticism in different countries, I know the issue in the Netherlands and in Germany a little bit, and I look at the United States and Turkey and the Netherlands, and I think there are differences with respect to the criticism. In the United States, there is not the same criticism, the critics, what I see in Turkey and in the Netherlands, and I think that the cultural, religious, or political infrastructure of these societies, the Dutch society of the Turkish society in Turkey, are different than the American society in the United States. The movement is a political movement. I don't think the movement has distance from the political parties, and it is a movement within the society from bottom up, a civil society movement, and there are maybe movement participants who has connections of relationships with all political parties, also in the Netherlands, maybe in Germany. But I can't say that the movement has the only relationship of contacts with the Christian parties or with liberal parties. It is a movement to take the middle way, and it is the main characterization of the movement. And I think that these Professor Herman Beck and Wiegers, they put the movement in these categorization, a movement of the middle way. And it is also the central teaching in Gülen's concept of understanding of ethic.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to add some insights to this question. And you said also, is the movement a religious movement? I think if you look at the movement from social perspective, you can say it's a social movement. If you look at from the religious perspective, you can say it's a religious or faith-based movement. If you look at from another perspective, you can say it's a cultural movement, of educational movement. And the discussion in the Netherlands, I have here an official document, a document of the Dutch Parliament, the discussion about the Gülen movement, and the interior minister, the current minister of the Dutch government, she said there are 4 criteria to analyze the anti-integrative organizations or groups. And she said, I can't see these, if I apply these criteria to the Gülen movement, I can't say that it's an anti-integrative organization. The first criterium is, it is in Dutch, there are groups or organizations, they try to create a parallel society. I can't see in the Gülen movement, they are active in the public domain with its programs and projects. They are participating in the society. The second criterium is the movement try to stimulate the isolation of some groups in the society. They try to stimulate, to participate minority groups, Muslim groups in the host society in these countries. The third criterium, there are groups they try to have power. And I know that the Gülen movement participants, if I look at their projects, they prefer to cooperate with local authorities, with institutions in the society. And this fourth criterium is there are groups they stimulate the interactive conflicts or tensions. If we only look at the intercultural activities of this movement, we can all say that the movement is an intercultural movement, a movement which tries to bring people with different background in a cultural setting in the host society. This is a relevant document, I think, from the Dutch Parliament, that the Gülen movement is not an anti-integrative organization of movement in the Netherlands.
Thank you. Father Michael.
A general perspective on Al-Qadawi. Gülen is not Al-Qadawi. Gülen is not, I think, Erasmus of Abraham Kuyper or other thinkers of theologians. Gülen, we have to look at the Gülen from broader perspective, I think. Gülen is a spiritual man, a Sufi, a man with spiritual ideas and practices. I can call him as a Sufi, as a spiritual leader in this sense. And Gülen is also an intellectual leader, an opinion leader. And if I look at his writings and speeches, he discussed the social problems in Turkey and broader in the world. And he is also a man of action. He is an application leader. I can't compare him, Gülen, with other thinkers, with other intellectuals. He has more characteristics from leadership perspective. He is a application leader. He is a thought leader, opinion leader. He is a Sufi, maybe spiritual leader. He has a broader capacity or broader characterization.